So morning, ladies and gents, welcome to our webinar today. So we will start. Webinar was supposed to start at 10. It's now 10:01. You're welcome. Just a few house rules. If you want to ask any question, you can raise your hand. You can also use the chat room to type in your questions. So we'll be taking in your questions as we proceed. Our topic today, as we had mentioned, is the impact of supply chain, on the economy's sustainability. And this is brought to you by SSP, which is Supply Systems and People, Sustainable Inclusive Business, and KEPSA, which is Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Today we have David Koba with us, who is the CEO at Supply Systems and People. He'll be taking us through the topic. We'll be getting to know more about him in a few. So welcome to our discussions today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sustainable Inclusive Business, where we support businesses and also facilitate dialogue, share knowledge, and ensure that we have partnerships. The name inclusive within Sustainable Inclusive Business refers to the ability of companies to include people at the bottom of the pyramid into their value chains, and also look at gender parity issues in addition to rights of employees at the workspace. We have four thematic areas that we deal with. One is circular economy, trying to help the country and also businesses to move from the linear economy concept to where we are able to use waste as an input for production. The next thing is try to help companies to reduce on their carbon footprint, that's climate change, and people power, and also redefining business values. So we welcome you to the discussions that we have. Please visit our website, www.sustainableinclusivebusiness.org.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, today is the 29th of May, 2020, and this is brought to you by Supply Systems and People, Sustainable Inclusive Business, and KEPSA. So we're looking at the impact of supply chain on economic sustainability, and also zooming into the effect of Covid-19 pandemic on sustainable procurement. Today we have our guest, who is David Koba. Is also a certified procurement individual or professional, and is also the CEO of Supply Systems and People. I am Ebenezer Madi, hosting this webinar today. I'm the Program Manager of Sustainable Inclusive Business at Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Mr. David, you're welcome. You can say hi to our participants today joining the webinar.
Hello.
Hi, Jefferson. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much. My name is Koba David. I'm the CEO of Supply Systems and People, a procurement consulting and advisory firm in Kenya. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, Bwana Koba, for agreeing to join us this day and to help us delve deeper into this discussion. You have insight as a professional in the supply chain industry, and we'll be happy for you to take us through in terms of what you see in this space, what is the impact of COVID-19 on sustainability, and also specifically to sustainable procurement, and larger topic if you look at it on supply chain management. So Bwana David, you're welcome. You can take the discussion.
Thank you very much, Shamada, for having me today as a panelist to discuss on matters of the COVID-19 pandemic effect on our country and around the globe. As you understand, no one knew the effect of pandemic could cause, but as you see, we are trying to experience a number of people who have been laid off due to issue of social distancing as a requirement to fulfill the condition of Ministry of Health on matters of social distancing to at least to end the pandemic. And as we see, global supply chain has also been disrupted due to the same, because mostly there's been a huge reliance on the sourcing of the products from China, and because of the bans due to traveling restrictions has caused the supply chain hugely disrupted, and also movement of the logistics and transport of the goods at the same time. You look at it in terms of Kenya as a country, to be specific, health sector has been overwhelmed, but it is indeed not much compared to overseas, where the pandemic hit them hardly compared to. And when you look in terms of economy, at least 80% of our people works in formal sectors, and have been unable to get to their needs because of this pandemic, and it has greatly affected them as well. Thank you. If we talk of innovations, which the pandemic has comes on, obviously as experts, we look at it in two ways. The pandemic has got two effects, positive and the negative, and here we'll be looking at the innovative part of it. Being overreliant in terms of sourcing from overseas, Asia to be specific, you realize that we've had that dominance, and we've not been thinking beyond our nose, because we'll feel like it is easy to source our products from China, instead of thinking on how we can reinvent our own processes and manufacturing processes within the country, so that we can be dependable. And when you look at it, we begin at number one. I'm really impressed to note that, for example, Kenyatta University has been able to invent a ventilator. And we are trying to imagine whether they will be able, pandemic wouldn't have been in place. And that is a good sign to show that the pandemic is really creating a positive side in terms of innovation. Economic improvement. There will be a lot of intertrade countries as we progress in, because the country will be able to be independent, countries will be able to be independent in terms of creating their own products and buy within themselves. And that will improve the SMEs, and at least the economy will be able to grow, instead of having been able massively spending across the Asia in terms of billions as per the GDP. When you look at the government intervention support, for that to happen, it will depend the government policies in terms of tax, and creating a conducive environment for SMEs, and also for those people could be willing to enter the market for other products. So the government plays a huge role on that note. If we talk of risk reduction and compliance, we talk of mostly terms of modern slavery and child abuse, where a number of companies around the world has been abusing the human rights in terms of using people who are not qualified, or sex issues to develop their products. And now, in the event that we have within our country, the companies, a supplier can be able to march into the country, to the facility, and be able to examine and carry some audit and see whether the company where is sourcing his products are able to comply with the best practices. Next.
Good. Thank you, Bonakoba. So at this point, I think we want to run a poll,
Yes.
just to be able to understand the dynamics of the sector, and also get an opinion from our participants today. So
Yes.
we'll be asking the question, from our observation, do we see an increase in innovation and also business opportunities in Kenya brought to you by the pandemic?
Absolutely.
So I'll ask the participants to take the opinion poll, which has been shared right now. And
Yes.
so we'll take a short break as they fill in this, and we'll be back. So I believe everyone should have taken the poll by now. We have the results coming in. So we see that 9% strongly agree with the statement, 82% agree, and 9% are undecided. So not so sure if they observe innovations or increased business opportunities in this space. We'll actually just leave the poll open for a while to allow probably those who will be coming in to also take part of the poll as we proceed. So we'll be proceeding with our presentation. So probably, Mr. Koba, you can also take us through. So you've looked at the positive side that has been brought about by COVID-19. So we can also look at the negative side that has been caused by the pandemic.
Thank you very much for the question, Amadi. The same. Indeed, as we look at it, as earlier as said, the pandemic has two positive and negative. That's within the sequential risks. And now I will be very happy to highlight the negative part of it. As we can see, there has been massive deaths around the globe, and people are really struggling with their loved ones who have parted, and they're wondering what's next to their lives. And of course, that has something to do with the communities and the society. When we look at it in terms of our health systems have been overwhelmed, and especially in Africa, we've been lucky enough, this pandemic has not hit us hard. I'm trying to imagine where we'll be if we'll be recording, for example, 5,000 cases per day or 1,000, if US and Japan and also China cases as well will happen in our country. And at least we are likely on the safe side. And if we are also to go at the modeling at the Ministry of Health, which they projected earlier, in terms of numbers, then at least will be badly hit. If you look at it in terms of businesses, SMEs and cooperatives have been affected across the world, not only in Kenya. And especially those new entrants who are coming into business, I'm sure they're already dead, because I can imagine how the accumulative bills, which are there in terms of rents and labor, and also other associated costs, it means that they can't cope with the situation because of these lockdowns. And these lockdowns has been experienced across countries, at least to minimize the impact of the pandemic and the spread of the virus. 40 million jobs have been lost globally. And if we talk specifically in Kenya, at least 150,000 have been lost. And of course, as people, we look at the community being highly affected because the employment rate has gone high. And we are trying to imagine how will it be if the pandemic continues. 55,000 jobs, 55,000 companies are highly affected. And these companies at least have been sourcing from China. And China being now the epidemic center of the virus, it means that there's no way goods can be sourced from there. Hence the reason why countries are trying to be somehow innovative to produce their products within internally. We talk of recession again. Recession is going to be there, but again, it depends how long the pandemic will end. And even if it ends, it also depends with the laid structures by the governments, individual governments in respective countries, at least to cushion that businesses and SMEs to come to their knees again. Thank you. Madi, next. Okay, we talk of local manufacturing. Of course, every country are trying to be innovative, which is a good thing, but at least at the end of the day, it comes with some challenges. Quality will be an issue of our product because people are also trying to see if they can come up with an acceptable product. But again, we have a concern whether a product could meet international required standards. and also a number of them will be affected in terms of lack of internal audit as far as the Kenya Bureau of Standards is concerned, at least to audit the processes and to see whether it's conforming to the best practices and meeting the required standards. We might also find the issue that our internal production might not satisfy our demands because of our capacity material, and that has been highly sourced from China as far as we understand, and also it has an issue with the logistic concern in sourcing those products from China to our country. Government intervention again is needed because we could indeed have the will to produce internally, but it will also depend on the government internal policies on how it can improve and lay a conducive environment to encourage the internal production. So, and that goes far as the tax and the environmental consultation policies, and also how the government can at least chip in terms of offering loans to facilitate the movement. Efficiency and the consistency could be also an issue. And again, that goes back to in terms of matters of production, whether we can meet the demand. Labor cost could be high. And as we understand in our history, our internally produced goods has been expensive. If you look, for example, the sugar produced from Momias has been expensive compared to the sugar sourced all along from Brazil. Then you wonder what has gone wrong. And not only in Brazil, even the sugar sourced from Uganda amounts to be cheaper compared to sugar produced internally. So I think, again, we need a government intervention and the willingness to support the business so that at least it encourages more production internally, and so that also the locals can also consume goods produced within. Thank you. Let's go next, Hamad.
David.
Thank you very much. I think we are now asking ourselves as a country and as the society, what is next for supply chain? As we understand, supply chain has been recognized as essential services, and has worked closely with the Ministry of Health and the health workers to combat the virus. And this is evident through coordination and supply of medical equipment, a supply of goods to ensure that people are able to get goods from the farm produce to the market, then to the consumption facilities. And of course, as the profession, it is a good support you've offered, and it's a good recognition that it is a serious and a function which we cannot do away with, or because it has got a direct link to do with our lives. If we talk in terms of our opinion, as far as sourcing is concerned, we needed to work collectively as a country and around the globe to ensure that at least we support internally produced goods. And this comes with the willingness of our people and the country at large, and does not really look at an individual, does not really look at the profession as a supply chain. No, it goes further beyond that. And now that will depend also, again, as earlier said, with whether the government is willing to lay down clear policies which supports the profession and the manufacturers to ensure that at least we're able to harness and encourage local produce to at least to avoid overruns of products from China. Again, this will also ease in, because if you look at it in terms of how products are procured from China to Kenya, for example, it takes around 30 days to 3 months. before it docks at the port of Mombasa. And that tells you that at least lead time is longer compared to if the goods are produced, for example, in Mombasa and you are Nairobi and you want to source the same goods. Definitely it will take around 2 days for goods to dock at Nairobi. And it is much faster compared to if you are to source the same similar goods in China. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bona David, for taking us through that presentation. I think at this point, moving forward,
yes,
we also want to take questions from our participants. So you can use the chat room to be able to raise your questions, and we will allow David to take your questions as you proceed. Let me just see if there's any question from. I don't see any question as yet.
yes.
But you have taken us through some of the positive things that the pandemic has brought during
Yes.
this period, and also the negative.
Yes.
I'm just thinking to myself, looking at the manufacturing sector, does this give us an opportunity as a country to look at the way we are able to create demand within our country so that we have local manufactured goods that can be sold here? So how is it that the country can be able to change this during this period? Because most of the products have been sourced from abroad. If you look for a case example is the PPEs, personal protective equipments, for example, the mask. We initially saw that there was an encouragement for us to leave the mask. I think it was the N95 to medical staff, until it came to a point that the government said that it's also good for us to protect ourselves. And we saw other companies coming in with the such like mask, which they also say is good enough for us to use. You also saw other masks that came in terms that had a brand of Kenya. So it's more or less like building a brand Kenya to the world, showing what our country has to offer. So what do you have to say about that? Is this an opportunity for the industry, especially
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, at least that shows how innovative as a country we are. But again, as earlier said, we've got an issue of quality. And yes, then the steps being taken by the manufacturers currently is indeed in order, because they wanted to caution and at least minimize the spread of the virus. And obviously they will do anything possible to ensure that we have the mask. But again, go back to the market and have a look at the current market, current masks which are circulating. You realize that the quality is an issue. But again, there's a plus to us, because this is a situation where we don't really expect that it's coming, and we could not foresee in any way or another, and not only in Kenya, but also around the world. It is like a shock coming once. So indeed, it's an opportunity, but we will have to focus so much on matters of quality to at least to conform to the best practices and international standard, to avoid just producing any goods anyhowly because we feel like we just have produced. But as time goes, we are hopeful that at least our innovation will continue, and we will be able at least to meet that standard. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Now, if we talk about the definition of a product, if you look at the marketing definition of a product, it includes both a physical product, be it let's say a pen, but you also have services. So you have service providers within, if so to speak, who are supplying a service to the industry. An example is airlines or the tourism sector. So how will they need to reinvent themselves during this period where they're barely doing any business?
Thank you very much. As you can see, they had no choice, and it's not they've got no choice to at least to readjust themselves in one way or another, because remember, this is an issue to do with the policies, and these are healthy policies, which really was issued to at least to combat the spread of the pandemic or the virus. Now, when you look at it in terms of, for example, airline, even if airline was to fly today, you realize that it cannot fly with the same number of passengers as required, and that will be very costly to them. Now, what's the next move? The next move, it means that they will have to hike their prices, at least to have an economy of scale and to satisfy their cost at the same time, which is also expensive. And those who might be interested to pay such a premium might be very few. And you realize that the same airline might not be able to fly on daily basis because of limited number of the clients who can be able to pay such amount. So at least we are in a situation whereby it's very technical, and you cannot really have a standard parameter and say, yes, we are going to follow this. But again, we are hopeful that this virus, since we are able to control as we are, at least it ends and the things turns to normalcy. And even if it doesn't, at least we'll be able to readjust from 1 meter to half a meter. At least we'll be able to get to our knees again. Thank you.
Taking some lessons from China, you see, they normally say that every crisis brings in an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
Or it could lead a country into depression.
Yes.
So I looked at China and how the economy was growing. So there was a point that people preferred to have goods imported as a state to show that they have wealth. For example, if it's the Bentleys, if it's the Rolex watch, then it reached a point that the common Mwananchi was not able to afford such commodities. Now, look at what happened. What happened was that there was still demand for goods that look unique and good. So what this resulted to was an increase on fake goods, counterfeit products. So we saw an increase of counterfeit products into the market. Do we see this happening in Kenya, that now that we don't have, as much as goods being imported as previously, yet there's still also demand going into the future? Do we see counterfeits coming into the markets in Kenya?
Absolutely, Ebenezer. You realize that as the country, we are trying to struggle with innovation, and everyone will want to come up with these products, at least to satisfy the demand. And the issue is demand. And the issue is whether we've got the willing buyers and willing buyers. Now, at least those counterfeit will be there. But now it depends on the government intervention in terms of policy and how Kenya National Bureau of Standards can intervene to ensure that at least the products produced meets the required standards and the processes. And this can be achieved through auditing the manufacturing systems and processing regular planned visits to ensure that at least they are meeting the standard and be able at least to be offered with a certificate of conformity to certify them that their products are fit for consumption and meet the international required standard and safety. Thank you.
That's an interesting observation, but what I'm thinking to myself is that, do we have the capacity to do that? Yes, of course, Kenyans are perceived to be innovative. For example, if you look at M-Pesa, if you look at, for example, what you have talked about, coming up with a ventilator machine. So there are different innovations coming in, but I think the challenge sometimes is access to capital to be able to kickstart such businesses. So do you still see innovations coming up, but being taken up by different countries? I saw a case example of, the normal kiondo that the normal Mwananchi uses to go and buy some kills or tomatoes in the market. This has also started to be, it's produced in China currently. You remember the winnowing tray?
Sure.
Which now people use to make some rice, or if it's maize that you're trying to get off some dust for you to cook. So
Yeah.
is there a possibility you seeing that things will change, that innovations will begin to sprout and turn into businesses rather than just being ideas?
Thank you very much, Amadi. As you realize that we've never been short of innovations in Kenya and Africa, and to be precise. Innovation has been there for so many years, but what we've been lacking as people is that the issue of funding. And as we even speak, there's a number of innovations which are there, but still we cannot be able to identify them because of limited resources or lack of capital to initiate. And it's very hard to tell somebody that, yes, this thing can work out in this way, or this model can be formed in this way, when he has not seen practically how it is functioning. Hence the reason why somebody is likely to die with this idea before implementation. Now, how do we get there? We will, of course, continue witnessing a number of innovations being carried away from us to US or UK because they've got the capacity and the willingness to support and finance those initiatives. Now, it also depends with our government and like-minded peoples within our country, whether they can be able to support a certain initiative. Once it comes to the attention or to the limelight, for example, the ventilator issue, how it can be patented, how it can be financed and protected to ensure that this is a Kenyan product and it can really go away from our country. And now that depends with also the issue with the government on how it can come up with the policies to ensure that once our innovation has been identified in Kenya, it has got a stake in Kenyan soil and it cannot be washed away. Thank you.
It's interesting. So you talked about a number of things and something came to mind. I think you talked about the word sustainability. And
Correct.
when the word sustainability comes to mind, there are different aspects that also run in mind. One is the ability of an institution to let me not use the word sustain again. The ability of a company to be able to be in the market or in existence for a foreseeable future, right?
Yeah, sure.
That means it's sustainable. The
Sure.
other thing, if you look at the element of sustainability that comes in, is with our environment.
Mm-hmm.
So as a procurement professional, do you see professionals in this space adopting sustainable practices where, for example, people are keen on procuring environmental friendly products? Is it something that is key for the sector, or this is still something in the future that we envision to have?
Thank you very much, Mr. Amadi. I think sustainability is here to stay because a company cannot die unless it's winded out. And as a people, we have got a planet to live, and it depends on how we live with the ecosystems around. And now that depends on how, again, companies are able to protect the environment, produce goods which are environmental friendly. For example, not littering the rivers, and also littering the environment, to protect the species within, and also to improve the livelihoods of the people they are serving. Because you see, if you don't improve the lives of the people as a company, then and you expect to thrive, then it is very hectic because these are your clients. If you don't support your client today, how do you really expect him to support you tomorrow in terms of buying your product? So it becomes a challenge. And now, hence the reason why there's an interconnection of these elements between people, organizations, and the environment, where an organization must really make or strive to make reasonable profit and improve the lives of the people, the lives of the workers, and also the communities in general. And at the same time, protecting the environment in which we live. Thank you.
Interesting. As a sustainable inclusive business, we refer to the 3 Ps. That's the people, planet, and profit. Where a company has to ensure that it takes care of its people, takes good care of the planet, which is the environment. And also, for it to be sustainable, it also has to look at the profit. That's profitability. So
Sure.
it's more almost like looking at from a 3D perspective,
Yeah.
people, planet, and profit. That's very interesting. Why is it that the procurement, just a quick question that I will ask, why is it that the procurement
Yes.
professionalism in Kenya is looked at a cash cow? Now, if you go into ethics.
That's a good question, Mr. Madi. Indeed, it's not only in Kenya, but across the world. Procurement has been seen as a function whereby one can make a quick kill, yeah? And I think that's a very wrong stereotype. We need to change as a people. And when you look at it, every organization spent at least 80% of their budget through procurement. Then it tells you that as a function, it must be really be in a position to guide the organization in a manner that is professional and organization can be able to achieve a maximum potential from its spending. Now, the question is, why is it perceived so? There's a number of few people who have really decided to work unethical. Hence the reason why the procurement as a function has branded as a cash cow. But that's not the narrative. There's a number of institutions, including the CIPS, which has got ethical programs. Also, SSP, we are offering free ethical advisory programs at the website, whereby we are able to advise supply chain practitioners the need to source responsibly. So I think as time goes, they'll come to an understanding that there's a need to source responsibly and be able to have to shape our shared value and improve the lives of our people in general. Thank
you. You talk about you doing some trainings. So it'll also be good if you can also allocate about 3 slots for some of those trainings for a few of our participants to also go through it.
Wow.
So we'll be happy if you can extend your goodwill in this period to also offer such kind of training to our participants.
Yeah, we can arrange on that note regarding the sustainable procurement and see how we can enhance the participant in the near future.
Yeah, now, sure. We also observe looking at sustainability and also looking at sustainable business practices. Yes. Products are coming up that are eco-friendly, so we have alternatives. For example, the other day we were talking of a ban on single-use plastic in protected areas. Yes. And people are looking out for alternative products to be able to procure. For example, if a straw, use of a straw in protected areas, for example, beaches and conservation areas will be banned, and someone is looking for an alternative product. So how does procurement in this space play a role to be able to help institutions adopt sustainable practices?
Thank you very much. As earlier said, procurement has got the capacity to advise the board and the management on the best practices to achieve in regard to the products they are sourcing. And it is indeed a big function, as earlier said, but it also depends on how the company, autonomy given by it, in terms of giving it powers to be able to advise. You see, logically, procurement has been always seen as a function under finance. And then it means if you have to give an advisory opinion, it must be channeled to finance. And the finance obviously will have to present within their perspective as finance. But if procurement was to be left as an independent function and offer advisory, we realize that it has got a number of benefits which has not really come to the attention of the management or the business communities in general.
That's interesting, because if I look at the way the human resource department also evolved with some time, is that we observed that HR as a function was not directly under as a department in itself. So slowly people got used to the trend of having a human resource person or a manager, and then it became a department. So there was a change in terms of the perspective. If you look at the arguments of one management guru, I think it's called Peter. Is it P? I forget the other name. He says that there was a change progressively to human resource being considered as a separate department. So do you see this happening where the procurement will be a standalone department in the near future?
Of course. I think they need to realize the power of procurement is coming, and the changes on the way. Not very long. We'll be able to see a director of procurement managing corporations independently from finance director. And you see, change takes time. The word procurement came into light around 1970s, and at least being formally recognized, it came into light around 1995. And that tells you, as we progress, we are able to see the need of procurement. In Kenya, the law was passed in 2005 to at least recognize the procurement as a function. And today, you cannot practice in procurement if you don't have a license and having recognized by the Kenya Institute of Supply Chain Management, which is a corporate government body recognized to certify supply chain practitioners in the country. So that change, I think, in need of seeing procurement sitting at the board levels and being independent function, it is with us.
That's a bit interesting to hear that. But also, people have perceived the procurement, should I call it, it's now that it's not really a department.
Yes.
People say it as someone else would put it, let me, in their own words,
Yes.
a pain in the wrong places. So, I mean, because if you want to get something, it's more or less like you're hitting a wall every time you send them a specification to get a product. So people have not changed their mindsets to see them as a department that supports the institution. They see them as opposers to the products that they will want to purchase. Just as you've said, if you have too many levels of you to pass your ideas, sometimes you get lost somewhere in between.
Yes.
So that's the same way others have a perception of the procurement department. So is this true, or you have a different opinion?
I think if we talk of request for quotation, tender, and for example, at least this is mere solicitation of documentation. That's an administrative cost. Anybody with a diploma in administration can do that. Procurement goes beyond that. It is a strategic function where we have to look at it in terms of how do we advise the company, for example, to procure sustainable for sustainability. Again, how do we achieve as a company in terms of ensuring that our staff are ethical and are producing within the limits and developing the best practices for the best interest of the organization in order to deliver more. Now, when you look at it in terms of request of quotation, it is a narrow mind which has been reduced for supply chain practitioners, but that's not the thing. And again, you look at supply chain as a function, it is a very big function, coming all long way from the logistics or transport, warehouse management, to the end user, from the factory, and also collection of the raw material from the farm produce. So it is a very big function compared to.
That brings me to your next question, because you were trying to tackle it a little bit when you're talking about supply chain and procurement. And I saw that you were trying to make a distinction between procurement and supply chain. And most people have not been able to understand this concept, the difference between procurement as a function and supply chain, where you talked about goods coming from the person who is providing a commodity to how it's produced. It's being taken through logistics in terms of transportation, and finally to the end user. So how would you define, how would you break it down for us to understand the difference between supply chain and procurement?
Thank you very much for your question. First thing, procurement is a core function within supply chain. And that means it's equivalent to logistics, it's equivalent to transport, it is equivalent to warehousing, it is also equivalent to how operations are concerned within the manufacturing sector. Now, if we talk of supply chain, it is a big function carrying all these components. And that goes far as from how the goods are carried from the raw materials from the farm, for example. If, for example, you are a beer company and you are producing beer whereby you need to source for bales, then it means you need to go back to the farmers who are planting these goods. Now, the process of getting those products, raw materials from the farmers, it comes back to the warehouse before it is dispatched to the production unit. Again, from there, once it has been produced, you realize that there's a packaging of the same goods, now ready-made goods, then ready for exportation to the sellers. And again, once you export the goods to the sellers, he has also got his warehouse whereby he has to store his goods before he dispatches to main resellers. From there, before it gets to the final consumer, that process is called supply chain. But procurement is only a unit which focuses on sourcing, charged with the acquisition of materials for the either production or for the services of an organization. Thank you.
Very well. I think you've understood the difference there, and it's very clear. I see there were questions that some of the participants have been able to type in. So Karim Bonsma, who is the director of Sustainable Inclusive Business, raises a question. So she asks that what makes products in Kenya expensive? And what is it that we need to do to be able to change that? If you compare, for example, which product can I use? For example, let me just use the masks, for example. Is that some of the masks that were being imported at some point before Corona, I think each mask was about 20 shillings.
Yes.
But when we were buying these products after Corona, it was about 150, 100 bob, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's a crazy business return that people were making there.
Sure.
Anyway, that was just out of the way. So the question here is that why are some of the products that are being produced locally are more expensive than those that are being imported?
Thank you very much for the question. And that goes back to our willingness, whether we as people, we can promote or encourage internal production. And as earlier said, I talked of sugar, mere sugar, just being sourced as far as Brazil. It is cheaper compared to our own sugar sourced here in Economies. Okay, and I think the big question is that as a country, we look at it in terms of making a bigger profit, and also lack of government intervention or willingness, to be precise, to support the internal manufacturing. Why? Because one would imagine how far is Brazil with Kenya, and how long it will take for sugar to travel all along to Kenya, and yet is less expensive compared to our own sugar. So, and when you realize the reason why China as a country has been able to thrive, they sell mass produce, but while making a very small margin, at the same time they're able to manage the economy of scale. But now in Kenya, the problem we have as a people, we want to sell little and make too much. I think that's where the problem is. And to solve that, it requires government intervention in the policies to regulate the prices of our goods. And which is why you see today, a mere mask, a cotton mask is being sold at 100 bob. And you'll imagine what's the cost of production of this item. You realize that it won't take, it cannot cost as far as 30 shillings, but extending to 100 shillings, then it means this seller is at least making around 200% profit, which is crazy.
Yeah, so David Makongo also comes in with a different perspective, and he's making a follow-up question to what Karim just asked.
Yes.
And he's asking, is the cost of production in Kenya high because of labor, or is it because of poor infrastructure, unreliable power, and also corruption.
There's
Because
a number of...
to him, he thinks that in Kenya,
Yes.
labor is relatively cheaper
Yes.
compared to other countries.
Yes, we've talked in terms of labor. I highly agree, because Kenya, as a people, we've really gone to school and we are skilled. But what I think is affecting our country is the issue of wanting to gain more at once. So let's talk to be precise to say is greedy. And it's a big challenge, because if we really want to make a 200% profit on our product, then you are really in a hurry. And that, of course, questions our products in terms of, if we were to compare them with a product from China, it is cheaper. But again, look at it in terms of the logistic constraint in relation to China's product. It is very extensive compared to a product manufactured, for example, from Eldoret at Rivertex. Now, I think also what is also affecting us as a country is the issue of also unethical practices. And this comes in hand with the corruption and the lack of accountability. We do not want to be accountable for actions, and you just feel like, yes, we can do away the way we want. But the buck stops with the government if they can regulate with the integrity policies, and to ensure that if unethical practices has been found in any organization, it faces some sanction or bans. At least once such rules are laid and are adhered to, not only being laid, are followed to the letter, then definitely as a country will shape the ethical practices and be able to see more innovation coming in, and to at least depending on our own products compared to. Thank you.
Mr. David Koba. So you mentioned about the role of the government in response to the comment by David Makongo.
Yes.
And now Benedict Cheriot also says, her opinion is that the taxes in Kenya are too high.
Absolutely.
And that also contributes to the cost of production. And that also brings in the perspective that Makongo is bringing in on infrastructure. So you see, the cost of production is cumulative in terms of taxes, the cost of transportation. And if your infrastructure is not good, means that the cost of transportation will also be high. So what's your perspective on that?
Of course, when you look at this problem, Mr. Ebenezer, it has got a number of factors. And I'm happy that Benedict has been able to point out on the issue of tax. And that, of course, falls within the government policies and intervention. We, as a government, as I said earlier, it must be able to offer some guidelines and the policies on how it can be able to support these teams. And to do that, it depends on the policy of a tax policy, whether it's friendly to the market, and whether it is able to monitor the compliance and production system and audit the whole entire system to ensure that the goods being produced are within the required parameters and benchmarked against the international best practices and organizations. So I think once the government intervenes, things will be somewhere.
Yeah. So we also talked about sustainability at some point, and Praxidis one day asks that, you see, for example, for you to make a product, of course, you need the raw materials.
Sure.
Of course, these materials are not infinite. I mean, if you keep using them, at some point they'll come to an end. In case example, you had that was it is it in Dubai or somewhere where they're mining? They have petroleum as a resource. So I think at some point it will come to an end. So she asked, do you think that most manufacturing companies are aware of the circular economy model, or is it something that is new to them?
No, they're aware. Hence the reason why most of them are focused on Africa. And as you understand, Africa has got 1,001 minerals, especially in Congo and Zimbabwe. And also in Kenya, for example, exploration of recent oil product in Turkana. And that tells you that at least they continue doing some research to ensure that they've got a number of these products available and got a number of also options for them. So we cannot say that they are just seated doing nothing. There's a lot which is happening, but again, we can say we've got limited idea how it will be. For example, as a planet, we've run out completely of uranium. And you remember, these are natural resources and it cannot be remodified or in any way or another. So once it is over, then it means as a planet, I think we have to pack and go.
Yeah. So also Benedict asks, how will the
Yes.
procurement personnel be affected
Yes.
by COVID-19 in terms of the interaction with the suppliers? Because again, if you look at trying to reduce the spread of the virus, it would mean that the procurement professionals will need to change. Case example is the point where someone is delivering a good. The procurement professional will need to counter check this product to ensure that it is the same product that they ordered for, and then they take it to the store, and then put it into the system so that now people can use the products. How will this change?
I think the procurement is far as concerned as a pandemic, within the pandemic context, we are already affected because first thing, entire supply chain has been affected. So there's a minimal movement of those goods coming in. And the issue of counterfeit will be there. So now it also depends with the internal control mechanisms laid down by the existing procurement function in a specific organization to be able to monitor that. Now, if we look at it, what will really happen? We are really a lot is happening at the moment, and the people are really being so innovative organizations, including us, whereby we are trying to put our products online to ensure that at least we can have, for example, barcode which can link the supplier and the seller, so that once the goods docks at the client's warehouse, is able to scan the code and be able to identify that indeed these goods are genuine. So there's a number of innovative products which are coming on, which at least will be able to ease the work, including the robots, which, for example, we've seen in Rwanda, robots have been able to play a huge role in combating the COVID-19 pandemic and in support to the health workers.
Now, you talk about robots, you talk about innovation and the adoption of innovation, right?
Yes.
The other thing that is there is that will this create some sense of fear amongst the procurement professionals that they will lose their jobs?
Thank you very much. Fear is there indeed, and the change is inevitable. As we look at it, the robot is not only coming in procurement, but across the function, all functions. And there's been all these talkings around the world whereby people are trying to imagine what will be the effect of the robots when they come in. And they're estimating that around 2 billion jobs will be lost because the robot is able to do such same work faster, 5 times faster compared to a normal human being. And I think as people, we have got the knowledge to control the robot, and robot cannot control us. And that now puts us in a room, at least to reduce or to reduce the speed and how the robot can function if it was, for example, pose a threat to human jobs and lives. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, David. I think I have already shared the poll that you took at the beginning, where we asked the question, or was it a statement where we are posing that have you observed an increase in innovation and business opportunities?
Yes.
So we also saw that 7% strongly agree with this statement, 80% agree, and 13% were undecided for that particular statement that we raised here. So we'll be moving forward to the next poll that we'll be taking. So we also posed the statement there that the government has done enough to ensure that locally produced goods are accessible and affordable. So I've just shared that right now. Please take that poll and we see what the results are, and we will proceed to our next session. We have a few minutes to close. We're supposed to end at 11. It's 11:02. So we'll be taking this out in the next few minutes. So let's just allow them a few minutes to take the poll, and then we'll proceed.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're still waiting for you. If you have not taken the poll, please take a poll. We're saying, yeah, okay. Some of you now are taking the poll. Probably you have not seen it. Good.
Mm-hmm.
We'll close it in a few. The rest of you have not taken the poll, please take it. The preliminary findings, before I end it, I'm seeing here that 11% strongly disagree with this statement, 60% disagree, and 30% are undecided. So this is an interesting feedback that we're getting here. Yeah. So I'll close the poll because we need to move. So I've shared with you the results of the poll right there on what we observe as a role of the government. Then just before we call it a day, I will also want to take the last poll. We'll also want to take a last poll where you give us your feedback in terms of if this webinar met your expectation or not. So that will be our last webinar. So I'll just run a short video. As you take the poll, please take the poll, and then I'll announce the results, and then we'll call it a day.
Thank you.
The concept of working at home is definitely something that we are having to think through. The situation we are in right now is forcing us in a good way to rethink our models, our culture, and see how we incorporate technology and the internet in our business. The other challenge we're facing as Telmark Africa right now is the fact that most of our corporate clients have closed down. But as they say, every cloud has a silver lining, and for us it's the opportunity post-COVID, because we believe that it shall come to pass. And with so many guys right now locked in, probably eating more than they're working out, I think it's a great opportunity. It will be a great opportunity for corporates now to engage their staff in different sports activities, and as Telmark Africa will be there to ensure that you get the most out of sports.
Thank you very much. So we have our poll right there with us. So I'll end the poll just to show you what you say on your feedback on this particular webinar. So 25% strongly agree that the webinar met your expectation. 58% agree, and 17% are undecided. So we also want to hear from the undecided 17% what areas that you think you want us to improve. So ideally, if we do the math, that will bring us to about 82% of you generally say that the webinar met your expectation. So thank you so much, Bwana David Koba, for taking your time and agreeing to be with us today and taking us through the session. So we appreciate you, and we encourage our participants also to keep talking with us. I have put our contacts down there, both for SSP and Sustainable Inclusive Business. So you can reach out to us, and you can also go to our website, which is www.sustainableinclusivebusiness.org. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing different webinars on different topics as we go by. And we also want you to share your feedback in terms of which areas you want us also to focus on. Because our main thing that we do is we facilitate dialogue, we build partnership, and we also able to support businesses to adopt or and bring in sustainable business practices into their processes. So thank you so much, Bwana David Koba.
It is my pleasure having me, Ebenezer, today. Thank you very much.
Asante sana. So this moment, we want to appreciate all our participants